Now, we are running a little bit behind time, which I suppose is not uncommon sometimes in these forums. But if I could please invite our final speaker today, it's a real treat to have somebody who's working actively on a project looking at valorization. So, you know, really thinking about developing that business case and actually applying those new technologies. So Peter's going to talk to you about a new technology they have to actually engage and transform the site and economically rehabilitate. So certainly Mount Morgan is one that all Queenslanders know about. And so, you know, the fact that Peter and his team are cracking into Mount Morgan is certainly a very exciting thing for all Queenslanders, if not all Australians. So Peter, if you'd like to please share your screen, that would be fantastic.
No, look, thanks for the invite. It's been a while since I've addressed one of these forums, probably 18 months on the project. I know there have been people following with interest, and the preceding speeches have covered a lot of the things, I guess, that we had to implement in getting the project across the line. The project's got a wonderful history, and I could talk forever on it. And I am going to jump around a little bit because we're at a pretty exciting part of this project where we will start construction this calendar year to go ahead with it. So for those of you that don't know the project, it's being led by Heritage Minerals as an SPV to develop the project. That's from the web page. The web page from the project links to a platform called Satori, which is a way you can present a storyboard. So the history of this mine was very important to us at the start. So you view the timeline here from project. The history to us was very important at the start because pretty much a lot of process technologies were developed at this site, and our main tailings areas were all different compositions from the gold and copper. So we had to really understand, I guess, where each tailings area came from and the history of the site. The bits of the history of this site that really interested me at the start, and you fall in love with it, was William Darcy was one of the founders who sold his share and went off to Persia. And as he was going broke, found oil and convinced Winston Churchill to change the Allied fleet over to oil. And then after the war, went back and founded British Petroleum. The whole Beneath Hill 60 movie, if you've seen that, was all Mount Morgan tunnellers who dug below in World War I. And the site is just full of history everywhere you look, from both well versed in shafts, in power contribution, etc. So we spent a lot of time understanding all this at the start to work out where we were going. Let's minimise that. And it was led by Green Gold at the start. Green Gold is a gold specialist company who has technology around recycling cyanide. This was important to us because the history of the site, jump over to something. The history of, there was a CIL plant run there in the 80s by Pico for 8 years. And this was from their closeout feasibility study that said, unless you could find a way to recycle the cyanide, the project's not economic. So we looked around the technologies on the market, and there are a few for recycling cyanide. But we obviously, with our involvement with Green Gold, get exposure to different clients' reports that they do, and this was one by, you can see it on the screen. But it pretty much said the resin one was demonstrated commercially, which was the only one in the scheme of things. And Green Gold had been working with Carbine, who were the people that owned this before Heritage Minerals. Carbine were publicly listed, and they fell over in 2018. And they were the sixth company to fall over since the government put these mine leases back out to tender in 2000. So quite a glorious history from the early part of the century till 1960, 1980s it closed. And then it became an environmental disaster, really, as most people know about it. It's been under care and maintenance by the Queensland government, and the government, in an effort to try and get someone to help them with the overall rehabilitation of the site, put it out to tender with a liability waiver on the environmental damage, the environmental contamination that was already there. And it fell over with these 6 companies for a variety of reasons, and I can go into some of them. But being able to recycle the cyanide was a key aspect to that. This was so Green Gold did design a resin plant for Carbine, who was there before. Now, Carbine's flow sheet was a little bit different. They were floating the pyrite off at the start, the copper off at the start, and they're also trying to get pyrite out of it. Heritage took a different approach. They didn't bother about the pyrite. The economics and the social impact didn't add up, and they doubled the size of the plant, but halved the capex in the process. And the resin technology at the back end that recycles the cyanide also captures the copper. So we didn't have to float that off at the start to stop the, cyanide soluble copper. We were able to nuke it. We're fine grinding, very high cyanide concentrations, and able to recycle it. So these were the process changes. That's a video. I'll jump over that. So the options we had from a resin point of view, which again was the only commercially proven one that we could choose, was a resin 1, which just recycles the cyanide, a resin 2, which is cyanide and the copper, and then a resin 3, which can also get a gold stream if it's a scavenged gold, if gold's going through to tailings at low levels. So this is a resin 2 with a CIL plant at the front end. But there was innovation the whole way along. So every chapter of the DFS was done differently. And I think that's important because some of the things that have been said today come up. So if I look at chapter 2, which was the resource, this project came with 2 JORC signed off resources, one by Norton, one by Carbine. And one of Anita's earlier slides said it was 10 million tonnes per annum, 10 million tonnes total. If at the Carbine rate, that was a 10-year project. If we doubled the plant size, that was a 5-year project. That didn't make it. We had to get to 6 years. And that's pretty difficult when you've got a finite resource for the tails. And we spent a lot of time on the bulk density. And we were able to model it through the tailings resource to 30 metres. There was an earlier slide of a Dando drill rig and Shane Charlton, our drilling manager, on one of the presentations. So the methodologies that have been done before us was the dry sand replacement method. This is for bulk density, where effectively they pour out a known volume, place sand in that volume, dry it or weigh it. But it wasn't representative. There weren't enough sites. It was at the top horizon of this. And this was the best method that we knew of when we started this process. But we used the Dando drill rig, which is a percussion core mechanism that goes down to, we got it down to 30 metres, 1 metre at a time. There it is there. And we were bringing out these PVC liner cores. But as you can see there, sometimes they broke. And what we didn't realise was that PVC liner was actually stretching inside the steel barrel that it went through the other, that was encasing it. And you can see the accuracy we were going to there on that. We were, cloud wrapping the ends of that, sealing it, rushing it to the laboratory in Rockhampton. And then we were like, with the accuracy we're measuring the gold assays to and the bulk densities are not the same accuracy. And as we improved, we ended up doing a PVC liner that couldn't stretch. and we cut it to the levels. There it is there, see the PVC liner? So over a year of drilling, our own methodology improved to remove a level of error, and we acquired a second Dando drill rig that we have on site, and we got to, 30 metres in 1 metre intervals, pulling out 1 metre at a time. It's pretty slow going, but we were able to actually model the bulk density through the resource. And we got to 12 million tonnes doing this method. So an extra year of production signed off through JORC. So that was a big plus side for us. And then the DFS moved on to metallurgy, where we looked at the history of it, the PICO's people who had the CIL plant and their recoveries of the different tailings areas. And we did a massive test work program. It was really a metallurgy problem to increase the recovery. So across this resource now, the DFS is about 1.2 grams, and it's greater, it's high 70s on the recovery. Processing, again, we doubled the flow rate to make the economics look a bit better, and we incorporated the resin technology. I will bring this over because it's important to understand the site for those of you that don't. There's this massive open cut pit in the middle of the facility that's flooded, and the environmental history that you hear about is when that overflows down the Dee River. There is sandstone there on the left, which the wall is broken for that. That was one of the original TSF sandstone. I assume you can see my cursor. Is here. Our resource is number 2, Mundic and red oxide here in the middle, and Shepherd's down the bottom. Them combined equals 12 million tonnes. But what happened in the this one? Jumping around a little bit. This was at the end of mining. You can see sandstone is there, and this was the open cut pit. Pico went through in the 80s and dredged 26 million tonnes of tails out of here and put them in the open cut pit here. And they got a bit close and they broke that wall. And so now it's a big contaminated area. There's 2 main catchments into here. It's a lot of water they need to treat and manage. Our project will, next month, build this cofferdam, permanently stopping the flow from sandstone into the OCP. And then we'll pump the water out and start building stage 1 of the TSF on this side. We will start number 2 as our first mine front, and the process plant will be built as you can see it. Then we'll move on to Shepherd's and Mundic and red oxide in between. Mundic and red oxide is actually the highest grade, but it's also the most complicated. There's a lot of heritage structures there, a lot of rubbish. There's pressure on that wall from the open cut pit. So that will give us 6 years to dewater that pit using a range of mechanisms. And then that at 27 million tonnes in the bottom of the pit is a future stage. So at the end of year 6, it's our phase 2. It's not part of our DFS other than in the resource. Now, for those of you that had heard me talk previously, our original plan was to put our tails in the open cut pit at the bottom. We had thought the grade was low because they'd already been reprocessed twice, effectively, because Pico did it when they put it in. But on Google Earth, and I did hear someone talking earlier about sampling over water, you can see our jack-up rig in May last year, where we did enough coring with that Dando rig, jacking it up in pH 3 water, to determine that we didn't want to fill that in, and that target was worth keeping open for us for the next phase. it was obviously 1 metre cores going through 15 to 30 metres of water and then into tails was a very slow process in a high risky environment. So we only did enough to ascertain what we needed to ascertain and changed our project to utilise the old TSF being sandstone. So that was in the future part of it. You can see some of the heritage things there. So the approvals have been a challenge, but also very supportive of this. This, like I said, originally there was a stage 2 agreement, which effectively was the state's ambition to have somebody to come in and reprocess the tailings, help them with the rehabilitation of the site, which has been estimated at 600 million, and take the gold out in the process. So there's 3 main primary approvals that we've worked through. The regional priority living area, which has been approved. The heritage agreements, which has been approved, but there's some management plans outstanding. And then the environmental amendment. So there was already an approval in place, but it's the only mine site that I know of with this agreement. So it's not one that the regulator's familiar with in terms of the rehabilitation liability and the closure of the site. But we're comfortable that we've got a path forward, and there is a lot of support from the community and the ministers on. This is fairly self-explanatory. Just shows you the areas. And there's a small sandstone gully resource in those fingers that we're just grabbing when we're cleaning that area up, because the hydraulic dredge from the 80s couldn't get to that. And actually, there was one of the early presentations talked about methodologies. We were going quite slow in these areas using that dando, probably a drill to 30 metres a day, to give you an idea. In Sandstone Gully, it was to 6 metres, and we used a pneumatic star picket rammer and a PVC core, and we probably were punching out 20 cores a day in this area to get this to the required density to jork that up. This is just shows you the mine plan of the areas. And to fly through the process plan. So that's on the edge of the open cut pit. The open cut pit's to the north of that image there. I'll just bring up on my screen also another video, which I think is.
Hey guys, my name is Brendan Busby. I'm a filmmaker from the Gold Coast. Heritage Minerals reached out to me for this project, which was great. It was I'm a Rocky boy, born and bred, so it's kind of close to my heart, this one. Growing up in Rocky, I didn't really know too much about the Mount Morgan gold mine itself. I knew of Mount Morgan, but I found it fascinating that we were never taught about this at school. It was such an amazing story worldwide, the byproducts, the people that came out of this mine that went on to influence the world. And we never learnt about it. So this is something that I really wanted to to tell the world. We're very early stages at the moment. We're still in the what I call research and development, where we're nutting out all the timelines and all the story. But every day something pops up, another story from someone else, you know, some other local that tells us about some other person that lived there and did this. So it's quite an evolving story. It's a great one. When Heritage Minerals first approached me for this project, they were big on being a history doc and celebrating the people of Mount Morgan, which is great. But for me, as a filmmaker and a storyteller, I want to follow this all the way. I want to follow this until you pour that first brick of gold. And for me, that's a brilliant payoff to this documentary. And to have the people there in the town enjoying that first moment as well. There's a beautiful lady by the name of Betty Brew, who was the longest-serving employee of the mine. We took her back up into the office, and it was an amazing story that she told us, that she worked there for 40-odd years and she never saw any gold, which I thought was so fascinating. She started there straight out of school as a junior and worked her way up until she was boss hog in the office there. So an amazing lady, and so witty and so full of knowledge. She'll be a big part of our documentary. We've been able to involve some great Queensland royalty, really. Busby Maru, the Queensland ambassadors are writing the music for this documentary. And Thomas is my cousin, so I've pulled a few favours there. And Rupert McCall, one of Australia's famous poets, he's going to be narrating the documentary. He wanted to write a custom poem about Mount Morgan itself and the proud people that live in the town. So it's really important for us in this documentary to celebrate the people of the town, to celebrate the First Nations people in particular. So what we want to do is we want to kick this whole documentary off with a welcome to country at the top of the cliffs, and then we'll go into Rupert McCall's custom piece, and the camera will fly past Rupert McCall, and the vision will turn into back in the day, all animated hustle and bustle of the mine. There's been a common trait through all the people we've met so far, and they are so passionate and proud of this town. They always talk about that smokestack, which is still standing. It's them. They're so proud, but there's a little thing lingering that they want this spark to be reignited, to give this town life again. So no pressure, Heritage Minerals. We want to see some gold.
So, whilst not completely aligned with the topic of the presentation, it's Heritage Minerals did lie low for a while on this project, and the whole industry was understanding what they were doing, and that was purely because there'd been 6 people gone before us. We have got a positive DFS. We are moving ahead with the project, as I've mentioned. And this town that is a legacy, probably one of the most famous towns in the world for gold mining, now sits at 18% unemployment in the latest census. And there's a real opportunity for this resource. I haven't even touched on mineralised waste, which there's 90 million tonnes of waste on this site. All the slag, of which there's 7.5 million tonnes of slag on it, that Anita's been and sampled with her team. There will be, once the first 12 million gets this project started, there will be the next 100 years of Mount Morgan. And Brendan Busby is quite a famous documentary person who's been commissioned to tell the story of Mount Morgan, and to I guess you'll see more of this project as his film hits the screens. So that's probably it from me, Anita.
Say that again, sorry.
That's probably it from me. If there's any
Excellent. So that was a cliffhanger to conclude on. Watch this space, which is good. And thank you for your time today, Peter. And I think, as I said before, you know, Mount Morgan is certainly a site of everyone's interest, particularly those Queenslanders on the line today. So it's really fantastic to see what's been happening, what's going to happen. It's good to see the community sort of involvement and sort of, I guess, enthusiasm for the project too, and the way that you've been working with them. And I personally am very keen to sort of continue our investigations into your slag. So I reckon there's something pretty juicy in that. But as soon as I get those assays results, Peter, I'll be forwarding them on to you. But yeah, we'll see what's in there. But anyway, so thank you very much, Peter, and thank you to those online. I'm going to hand back to Helen, who is our ultimate chair. So thanks, Helen.